Yeah, well, yeah. All right, all right. But now look, if we're looking at this solely in human terms, you say throw in the towel. All right? Come on, you're not going to be able to win this thing. We don't fight in those terms. We don't. This is something where you're talking about such foundational things that what our job is, Mother Teresa said, not to be successful, but to be faithful. And Benedict somewhere, I forget where it was, a couple of times, said the job of Christians, not just Catholics, Christians, is to build centers, to build communities, families, and to pray, and to educate, homeschool, train children. The universities are a mixed bag. I don't know the situation up here in detail. I'm not going to comment on it. We have a development in the United States where we have small and not so small Catholic colleges and universities that are doing the job. And we just do it. You just do your thing and trust God. Trust God. The church has gone through worse things than this in the past. I think, sure, but you know what? You know why this is a culture that, and I'm not disparaging any individual, this is a culture that has lost not only its faith, but its mind. That's why I emphasized reason. Because this is a culture that has lost the ability of reason to know anything. You know, deconstructionist and that stuff and that kind of thing. But don't be discouraged. I mean, you pray the rosary. And don't be discouraged about these things. But it's important to be able to put them in the proper perspective and not to be conned when somebody says, well, right or wrong is whatever I decide. No, man, that's the anti-solution. You know, that doesn't work. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. 80 years old, I'm at the halfway point, so I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, sir. Yeah, sure. I know we are. All right. But the question is, what are we made of? All right? And one of the things that is missing today is an appreciation of spiritual reality. And the thing about it is this, that a spirit is a being with no parts. What are you talking about? Well, okay. Let me ask you this. If we can do things that a material being can't do, and that only a spiritual being can do, beyond the capacity of a material being, because remember, a material being is composed of parts, as this thing is, then you have to say, we're spiritual. If we can do things that only a spiritual being can do, that a material being can't do, and there are two things, right? One is abstraction. The other is reflection. Abstraction is this. I look at that exit sign, all right? What is it? It's a sign, okay? I go out in the hall, and there's a square thing out there with lettering on it. I look at it, and I say sign. Because I have the abstract idea of a sign. I know this is not a sign, unless I've got something written on the side of it. But I have that abstract idea, and the point is, right, which I would ask you to consider, the point is that that abstract idea does not exist by itself in the material world. Getting that abstract idea is not simply the registration of material impressions. You put a hamburger and a brick on the floor, and Rex, your dog. We have a dog named, or had a dog named Rex. We spelled it W-R-E-C-K-S. But you put a hamburger and a brick on the floor, and Rex is going to go for that hamburger every time. But we know from observation that Rex doesn't sit around and think hamburger. We know that by observation. But here's the interesting thing. If that's all we had to go on, you got a point. I understand where you're coming from. If that's all we had to go on, our observation, we would have interminable debates about whether there's any difference between us and chimpanzees, for example. Washoe the chimp, the most famous chimp in history, recently died. He was Australian. That's why he died. And he could do all kinds of things. He could do math problems, right? Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. And it was Pavlov's thing. They trained him to do that. They have horses that do math problems. They're trained to do that. And by observation, we look and we say, wait a minute. No. They can't abstract. How do you know? What's the first thing you do if you're going to build something? You're going to build a birdhouse, all right? What's the first thing you do? You're going to build that birdhouse. What's the first thing you do? No. Yeah. Imagine, yes, you visualize it. All right? You visualize it. And when you're visualizing that birdhouse, you're visualizing it. That visualized birdhouse does not exist in the material world. You're visualizing that birdhouse is an act of abstraction rather than registering sense impressions. Does not exist in the material world. You have never seen. If you do, call me collect. You've never seen a couple of birds on a branch examining a set of plans. Never have. You never will. Because they operate by instinct. Beavers build dams, a dam site better than human beings do. Right? By the instinct built into them by their intelligent maker. That's abstraction. Reflection is something else. I'm going to bore you with this, but reflection means that, and you know this is true, you can get outside of yourself and look back on yourself. You can reflect on yourself. You don't have to be falling out of an airplane to do it. You can reflect on your whole life. You reflect on the fact that you're reflecting. A material being cannot do it. The top half can look at the bottom half. The bottom half can look at the top half. It cannot get outside of itself and look back on itself because it is bound by the matter. The Greeks figured that out. It's not catechism. That's how we know that we're spiritual. And if we're spiritual, since death is the breaking up of something into its parts, you know that. The death of the human being is the breaking up of the soul and the body. The death of a basketball team comes at graduation. All right? The spiritual being has no parts. So just think about it. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Because we can do things that animals can't, therefore, yeah, that other animals can't. that we're somehow spiritual. I mean, there are animals that can do things that we can't, fly, stuff like that.
Good question. I'm asking you whether we can do things that a material being can't do. When I was talking about the inclinations, it's interesting that St. Thomas divides those into inclinations common to all living beings, like nourishment, inclinations that we have in common with animals, right, like procreation, and inclinations that are proper to human persons, to know and to choose, for example. Yeah, but the question is, how do you know we're spiritual? And just think about it. I'm not asking you to sign a pledge tonight or anything. Just think about it. Your reason, your faith and reason work together. And we can know everything we have to know through those. I have a feeling I'm getting the hook. He's a very dangerous guy. So oh, yeah. No.
I'm kind of wondering if I could just get a quick show of hands. How many people here think slavery is good? No hands. Owning another human being as property. Sure. Peacetime. Okay, but in peacetime? No? Well, I would say that everyone here who didn't put up their hand, so everyone, is a more moral being than the God of the Bible, then, because he does condone slavery. And in fact, he also condones beating your slave to an inch of their life. So.
Historically, this is, okay, yeah, you guys can all stay to 1:30, right? Historically, it's interesting, a book written on this, what the heck is his name? Prenzer, I think, it's something like that, wrote a fairly short book on the treatment of slavery by the church. It's really interesting because what we call chattel slavery, which is what we were talking about in the Emancipation Proclamation, that kind of thing, is wrong. And the popes have consistently, for centuries, opposed it. The problem is that the word servus, S-E-R-V-U-S, covers different forms of servitude in Roman law and in ancient law. And so when you call somebody a slave, in some of those situations, you have to ask, well, what is it? Is it an indentured servant? Is it this kind of thing? Or is it a chattel slavery kind of thing, to the extent that we have? Well, John North can tell you that there's more slavery going on today in third world countries than we ever had. And it's evil. I mean, then there is slavery of different kinds. There is sex slavery. There is bringing, John and I were talking about it today, and he's much more conversant with this than I am. Business of taking young girls from Sudan and luring them into other countries and immediately turning them into sex slaves. Sure, slavery is wrong. So what? I mean, God never said that it was good to deny the essential rights of human beings, except, of course, criminal punishment, something like that. But you got to be careful about the word slavery and that word servitude, because what was called servitude, servus, S-E-R-V-U-S, in the Roman times, was not necessarily what we're talking about today, in terms of slavery, yeah. Do I have a favorite translation of the... What? Okay. Okay. Hey, you're looking at the wrong guy. And I'm not an exegete. And okay, question. Yeah. Where? Where do you speak? Absolutely, he's absolutely right. Absolutely. If you give to the state the ability to confer rights on you, I'm not talking about traffic or driving licenses and things like that, but if you give to the state the right to define your fundamental rights, it's lights out, it's curtains, because you're giving them the power to take them away. Look, I think I've worn you out. I'm going to be here hanging around for a while, but I really appreciate you coming out. This was an extraordinary kind of a thing. And I please convey to the guys who are protesting out there that, hey, listen, I wish you're on our side because you got some kind of fervor. But I'm not throwing rocks at them or disparaging them. But at the same time, we got to think about some basic things. We really do. And the most important thing I ask you to do is pray for both of our countries. Pray. Because we're moving into times where we are on the winning side. We are. We know that. But we're going to need the grace of God to do our part. So pray and trust God. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now I'll ask Dr. Perrin if he will formally thank Charles Rice.
It's really a pleasure. I just want to stand up for a sec. We'll give you one last round of applause at the end. To be on the platform here with you tonight, Dr. Rice, I want to thank you for your honesty, for your straightforwardness, and your courage in bringing forward your positions to us this evening. I believe that you brought forward your perspective clearly and with humility, and for this I thank you. As an academic, you have succeeded in provoking thought, probing our perhaps settled positions, and enlightening us, inviting us to think again. And for this, I thank you. Thanking you for taking time to be with us, for being open to the view of the other, as you have demonstrated tonight, and engaging in real critical debate on these fundamental and important issues. Your frequent touches of humor have helped us know you personally. Levity always brings grace, and I believe you've given us that this evening. We wish you all the best in your second half of life, as you said. And so please join me one more time in thanking Dr. Rice.